Hello. Today is Decem-Baron 4th, 2020. And, today I will continue sharing some of my early D&D exploits. So, right after that steampunk campaign, Here There Be Science, Here There Be Dragons, we rotated being Dungeon Masters. I can say the next 3 campaigns that we did, I don't remember if there were titles to them or anything, but like I mentioned in the past, yesterday that there were 4 main core players, right? And so 2 of those players were the DMs for these next 3 campaigns that I will talk about here. For lack of any definitive titles, I'm going to call them the Norse campaign, the Asian campaign, and the Greek campaign. So, the DM for the Norse and Greek campaigns, we'll call him Thomas, and the one who was the DM for the Asian campaign, let's see. We'll call him Larry. Thomas for the Norse and Greek campaigns, and Larry for the Asian campaigns. And of course, there was Joseph there, as well as the 4th person, Sean. I'm making these names up in the fly. I want to protect people's identity here, so forgive me if I mix up the names and things like that, but the names aren't ultimately what's important here. What's important are the experiences, the stories I have to share here. And once again, I am grateful that you are here to listen and to just chillax a bit. So yeah, they were all relatively short-ish campaigns. They didn't last much longer than the steampunk campaign did. No more than 10 to 12 sessions each. But they were still a lot of fun. Just, having fun in different worlds, right? For the Norse campaign, I created a character named Fjord Niflheim. Once again, all 3 of these were homebrew, by the way, all these campaigns. And so homebrew races and classes were allowed. So I chose a variant, sort of like a chillborn human who has a sort of an aura of cold around him. And I chose the class Warp Spider. I thought that would be kind of interesting. Basically, he could Misty Step. He could do short teleportations several times a day. And so that was a lot of fun. We also did not start at level 1. We started at level 5 or something. But yeah. I don't remember too much of the specifics of the plot, but I do remember there's a fair amount of dealing with local chieftains and jarls and stuff, and it every so often we battled some sort of Norse monster or something, like a giant wolf. Whether or not that was actually Fenrir or something symbolic of Fenrir, I'm not sure. At the very end, we fought some sort of evil cultist with some kind of ice serpent, which was really cool. I have to say, though, the most memorable session was this siege that happened. The local jarl asked the group to protect his jarldom from siege, from being attacked by an army of skeletons and frost giants. And so, yeah, we stationed ourselves at a particular gate, and, there's a map and everything. It was pretty cool. We didn't have, we kind of had miniatures. It was more like miniatures on a grid, piece of paper and that kind of thing. But the skeletons were bringing in this big, battering ram machine. And so, the thing is, all of the other characters had good ranged attacks, whether that be ranged spells or ranged bow and arrows, that kind of thing. Fjord Niflheim did not. Fjord Niflheim was based on the idea, at least in combat anyway, it was based on the idea of warping to the place to attack and stabbing with short swords and rapier and stuff like that, and slicing and stabbing and all that stuff right there, and then warping out. So in a siege, there wasn't very much he could do, like standing on a wall, waiting for people to come. And so, I decided to have Fjord like warp to the top of the battering ram machine to see if he could like attack it and dismantle it. It was very tough, all the bits of metal and everything, but he wasn't able to do that. So he thought of the next big thing, and here's where the hilarity comes in. He saw the line of frost giants. There was probably like 3 or 4 of them in a row in the back lines behind these dozens and dozens of skeleton soldiers. And so he thought, I know. I will go out there and attack the giants. Try to reduce that sort of like, that should weaken their army significantly, right? Bringing down one of the giants. So I had Fjord Niflheim warp to the shoulder of one of the giants and just kind of like try to have him hack away at the neck and whatever. And now in Dungeons and Dragons, giants are only about they're between like 15 and 30 feet tall. They're not truly like planet-sized enormous or anything. They are big. They're still very intimidating, but they're not much taller than like a 3-story building usually. Again, still intimidating, but for some reason, we kind of like, at least at the time, being the young D&D player that I was, I thought giants were huge. I thought that humans were literally this small compared to giants. I thought that's what Fjord Niflheim was doing. I thought he was just kind of like, here, like attacking the neck right there. Which is like, that's kind of crazy that there would be giants, that giants would be that big in D&D. But you know what? It's a homebrew game. Anything goes, right? That's how big the giants were. I don't think I ever asked how big they were, or maybe I did, and the DM just kind of like explained, or maybe I don't know exactly how it happened, but just somehow we just all came to some agreement silently that giants would be as big as a human being, like, this would be a human and I would be a giant, essentially. And that's about how big, something kind of like that, yeah. So, hacking away at the neck, which at that size, a human would give like, some nasty scars or something, but nothing like truly like fatal outright. And so, once again, all he was doing was scratching the surface, literally. And so, I thought it'd be fun to have Fjord climb up the giant's face and try to rupture an eardrum, because I figured Fjord could definitely like stick his sword into the ear canal. I don't want to get too graphic or whatever. That was the plan, essentially. That would disorient the giant and cause so much pain to the giant that I hoped it would take them out of commission, right? So Fjord didn't quite get that done. The giant, of course, noticed this, this pest on its shoulder, and so, the giant was kind of like trying to reach for Fjord and grab him, and Fjord took refuge inside the giant's ear, like, kind of like huddled inside that cavity there in the ear, like around in there. Not too deep, just like in the outer ear. And the giant did what any, rational person would do in such a situation. Right there. Just kind of like, slamming Fjord, with his finger, essentially. Fjord didn't outright die there. Fjord continued on to the end the conclusion of the campaign, but man, that was painful. Being the player of Fjord, I should have seen that coming. But, it was just all these things that Fjord was doing to try to help in a siege situation, basically try to be aggressive when you're supposed to, when you're on the defensive side of a siege, right? And the funny thing is, even though Fjord did a lot of damage and was like chipping away at the giant's hit points, in the end, one of the other players had a familiar, some sort of cherub familiar or something, that always made this sound like every time it shot something, it went, ha! Or whatever, like something dumb like that. It was hilarious. But that cherub did the final blow to that giant. I was well, Fjord. I loved it. I was having a lot of fun, but like Fjord was frustrated, was so upset about that. But yeah, the siege was successful. We were able to finally whittle away at the army and at the giants, and ultimately the Jarldom did get protected. From all the different sides, because we had held our side of the fortress. So yeah, that was the Norse campaign. That's about all I can tell you about that. But that, yeah, definitely a memorable story right there. So hilarious. The Asian campaign, I call it that. It's not necessarily. So the DM for that one, he had lots of really fun ideas. He also really liked kind of being the Dark Souls of DMs among us. He if we're doing a homebrew campaign, watch out. He makes dangerous bosses that feel like they're unkillable. That he would tell you he's not a min-maxer. He's not one to try to crunch the numbers to maximize the numbers and the mechanics and whatever. He did sometimes play that way, and he did often create and run his creatures, his monsters that way. Sometimes we joke and oh, it's so OP and all that. Which, overpowered, yes. Impossible, no. Just like Dark Souls, right? But it was all in good fun anyway. But yeah, so in this Asian campaign, essentially it was set on this floating continent. Literally continent size. He made this big map and everything. And the continent was not only large enough, it was thick enough to have underground tunnels in it. Underground communities. This is pretty ridiculous and kind of cool. But there are certainly holes in the continent as well, so you don't want to fall off and all that. But yeah, he had a bunch of politics that's really well thought out, more thought out than my Here There Be Science, Here There Be Dragons world. When I world build for Dungeons and Dragons, I tend to kind of start small, start local, and sort of build out from there whenever we need it, right? That's what I usually do. Or there have been times where I would actually think of as many different things as possible and build out the playable world as much as I can. I've done that before. So there are certainly merits to different approaches. That's what he did. And he went all in on the different factions and the different nations and political strifes and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so we were a group of adventurers starting at level 10, I think. He wanted a higher level campaign, so that way he could dish more terrifying monsters and enemies and unkillable ninjas at us or whatever, assassins, stuff like that. But yeah, we were sent up there for various jobs and stuff like that. We were ambushed by some tree-striding archers. Actually, those archers captured us, and we ended up in a gladiator arena, and we fought in gladiator pits, which was fun. But we also made this elaborate escape and everything to get out of there. And the only way we could get out was through one of those tunnels, so that we could try to make our way to some other more friendly country to continue our jobs or our service or whatever. What we were hired to do, something like that. But yeah, a couple of crazy stories happened in that underground area. First of all, among the many things we ran across down there, we ran into a colony of giants. More giants, right? We were in this underground mountainous area, and I think we were captured by these giants, and these giants were no joke. We knew that even at our modest level, about a level 13 or 14 or whatever, we knew we could not battle these giants and come out alive. There was no way. And the giant king was pretty much going to execute the characters. we didn't know what we were going to do. I still don't quite remember what the DM was planning to have happen, but he let us try to figure stuff out. One of the players was a cleric for the Raven Queen. And when you get to be about like level 10 or something, you get something called Divine Intervention. Or maybe it's earlier than that, but he had Divine Intervention. Divine Intervention is a cleric feature that essentially allows you to entreat the deity your cleric character worships for some kind of favor, and it will happen. Divine Intervention. When you reach level 20 or something, Divine Intervention will happen automatically, without fail, and you can only use it once every 7 days in the game world. When you're, like, the first time you get it, though, like at level 10-ish or whatever, you have, you roll a dice. You have, like, I think it's like a 1 in 10 chance-ish. I think it was more like, it has to do with your level, actually. I think you roll a D100, and you have to roll equal to or less than your level. And in this case, it was level, I guess, was it level 10 or something? Whatever. Had about a 10 to 15% chance of succeeding in getting Divine Intervention. And so we weren't expecting much, but you know what? It was a last-ditch effort. Have the Raven Queen be entreated on our behalf, that maybe we might be delivered. And, the fact that I'm telling you this story, you might guess what happened. The player who played the cleric rolled low enough for the Raven Queen to be entreated to rescue us, essentially. So the Raven Queen came down, destroyed the whole giant village, and that was that. I don't know if the DM was upset about that. I don't think he really was. Again, all in good fun. I don't think any of us ever really got upset at each other, but except, jokingly. But man, that was not the way he expected that to go. But as kind of incredible as that was, that did not quite compare to one of the last encounters that we had in that campaign. We never finished the campaign, at least what the DM was planning. I don't know if it was schedules or whatever, but we came to a certain conclusion, and we could have continued from that point, but we decided to move on to something else, to another campaign. We went through campaigns. We probably went through a campaign once every few months or something, which was fine for us. It was my campaigns tend to be a little bit longer now, but I'm also happy with shorter ones as well. It just depends on the group, But anyway, the craziest thing was we reached this area, this flat plains area with hills, underground still, by the way, and we hear this rumble. This encounter should tell you how much this DM was inspired by certain challenging boss battle video games. Which, you know what, I'm a fan of those kind of games too. Those I love that kind of boss that kind of concept. But we see off in the distance some kind of colossus. So think Shadow of the Colossus, the video game. And think of maybe the two-legged colossus with some big sword or something like that. Something that big. Maybe a little bit bigger, actually. What the DM actually did to represent this colossus was he actually took a sheet of grid paper. The grid paper had very small squares. And he actually cut out an outline of the colossus. Head, arms, torso, legs. And he laid it on the ground, on the table. And each square was 5 feet, and so it was just probably 100 feet or more tall, maybe a couple 100 feet. He also cut out a couple other things. He cut out 2 footprints for the Colossus, and he cut out a rectangular sword. Because essentially what he wanted us to do, Shadow of the Colossus style, was to climb onto the Colossus and to try to find its weak spots, which really, really cool, right? It was such that alone made it really, really fun. And he wouldn't tell us where the weak spots were either. We had to figure it out ourselves. He said there were half a dozen weak spots or something. But yeah, not only that, on our way to the Colossus, which, by the way, apparently we had to fight it, otherwise it would not let us like have peace through the way. Like it would attack us regardless. The footprints, as you might have guessed, were basically it's stomping the ground. We had to make sure that we were not going to get stamped on. And also, there were a few times where, that blade that was cut out, like this rectangular blade from the grid paper, the Colossus would like slam that blade down and just like sweep it across the ground. And so that's the GM like took the cutout sword blade and kind of like had it travel across the grid to see if any of us would get hit or clobbered by that big stone pillar essentially of a sword. But yeah, we climbed up. We'd use spells like Fireball and whatever to try to find its weak points. Which I remember, 2 of its weak points were one behind each of its knees, like on the back side of each of its knees. Each of its eyes, I think something on its forehead. I think its hands as well, something like that. But yeah, my character in that campaign was a half-orc pirate barbarian named Decem-Baron. I tend to, when I make characters, I tend to try to do something I haven't done before, whether it be the race or the class or both or some kind of concept, right? Because I tend to, I love bards, I love like smart characters and things like that. I decided half-orc barbarian was something I wasn't really like used to, even though I was still new, so I wasn't used to very much. But that was something different for me. Decem-Baron, the half-orc pirate, essentially, barbarian. So I had Dench like climb up, and the Colossus would also shake itself as well, so we had to try to stay on and cling on as well, or risk falling down and losing some of our progress. Eventually, Decem-Baron was able to get to the Colossus's eyes and attack those. And but yeah, long story short, we beat the Colossus. We were able to get out, and there was one final encounter with like some warriors and led by a dragon or something like that. But and that was where the campaign concluded at about level 15. But yeah, that Colossus fight, I really liked how my friend, the dungeon master there, handled that. It's really, really quite cool. So if you want to do a Shadow of the Colossus style fight in Dungeons and Dragons, or really any tabletop RPG, I guess you could do that. I also am aware of a few tabletop RPGs out there that were made like Shadow of the Colossus style. Like, they have rules for how you can hurt different body parts or whatever. Anyway, whatever. Or weak spots. But yeah, that was the Asian campaign. Again, I'm pretty sure that had a title, but I don't remember what it was. Something like Zhang or whatever. Legend of Zhang. The continent was called Zhang, I think. I don't know. But yeah, and then finally I'll briefly mention this Greek campaign. So for that, at the time my girlfriend, now my wife, was playing along with us. That was her. I think that was her first D&D campaign, actually. I made once again, homebrew was allowed. Homebrew races and classes. The same DM the same DM who did the Norse campaign also did the Greek campaign. He really likes that kind of stuff, like mythology and stuff and whatever. So my wife goes by Blaze online, so I'll call her that. Blaze's character was something like a lawful good cleric of. Maybe that wasn't her first campaign. Maybe she played something else before. There might have been a few other campaigns that happened before the Greek one did, but I'm lumping it with this one. Blaze doesn't do. She doesn't feel she can play lawful good characters very well. She played a cleric of Athena in this one, and she just kind of like she likes chaotic and neutral characters more. Rogues, sorcerers, warlocks, that kind of thing. I like playing lawful good, neutral good characters, bards, paladins, that sort of thing. Wizards, that sort of thing. But yeah, anyway, I'm sorry to say that I don't remember a lot of specifics or like really memorable like moments in the Greek campaign. I just remember it was a lot of fun. There was stuff about like going to the island of Crete or something. There's something about releasing some Titan or some monstrosity or whatever that the Greek gods are upset about that. We ran into shark people. So there's that. Yeah, just that was just like a fun, again, short-lived, but I think it had its course and everything. These are the sorts of other games that I did not DM for in that first D&D group that I was in, which I'm still friends with each of them. So yeah, Norse campaign, Asian campaign, and Greek campaign, as I call them. And just, a lot of fun moments there. And I think that is what I will. I think that is what I will conclude with. Honestly, I don't have much more to say about those. Once again, I thank you very much for listening, and I hope you make it a great day. I'll see you tomorrow. All the best. Thank you.